All right, Dan, it looks like we're live. I want to thank everybody for joining our Ransomware Resiliency for the Enterprise think tank. When I say live, I mean we are actually truly live. So welcome everybody. You're interacting with us in real time. Why that's important? We want you folks to participate in the chat. And so there's definitely a chat from a Zoom perspective. And also, if at any point later on when we open it up the floor for additional questions, we'll take periodic breaks throughout the presentation. If you want to get unmuted so that you can ask your question or elaborate live, feel free to raise your hand in the function there on the participant section, and we'll do our best to unmute you and get your questions in. But let's start with introductions. I'm Alex Restrepo. I'm with Solutions Marketing for Veritas. I've been with Veritas for about 8 years in a number of different roles. And over the past about a year now, Dan, I've had the pleasure of working with Dan and a few others with regards to our ransomware resiliency solutions. And with that, Dan, if you want to introduce yourself. You're currently on mute, so feel free to unmute yourself. Oh, you can unmute yourself. Gotcha. I will get that for you, Dan. There you go.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for joining. I manage our security and compliance roadmap with some other product managers and been here about a year. And it's super exciting to participate and give you a rundown of what's going on and answer your questions.
Awesome, Dan. All right, so to give you an idea of what we're going to discuss a handful of things, and we're going to start off with where are we today when it comes to ransomware resiliency. And I'll just start off at the high level, Dan, and I'll ask you to double click. At the high level, we talk about ransomware resiliency as something that you need to have a layered approach to tackling. And so we take a look at a NIST model in terms of how they approach cybersecurity. And although they have 5 different pillars, we focus in on 3 of those, and those are protect, detect, and recover. We figure it made sense to zero in on where we can contribute in a meaningful way to the enterprise. So Dan, why don't you tell us a little bit about where we are today from the perspective of protect, detect, recover, and what we're doing for the enterprise?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said, I've been here a year, and I'm part of a lean in effort to improve our security posture across those 3 pillars. And when we asked ourselves, when we looked at those 5 and we wanted to come up with, what's our strategic plan relative to helping people with ransomware resiliency and security, we thought those 3, protect, detect, recover, were the 3 to continue to grow on. We already had a lot of functionality within those pillars, but we've really expanded our depth and development across all 3. So for example, on the past summer release, we really taken the protect space and have grown it. So immutability was a security control that we've never had before. And now with 8.3 and our Flex 2.0 platform, we support immutability agnostic to storage. Flex is our platform where we support the full solution, but we also support OST partners. And you'll see some future stuff in the summer supporting S3 objects like AWS in the cloud, for example, and their retention lock functionality. On the third-party OST front, we support data domain. Also, NEC is expected to be up and running sometime in Q1 here. So we're really excited about our immutability play, where Net Backup can manage your immutable storage into whatever storage you want. And if you haven't taken a look at our Flex platform and our containerized approach, it's really an excellent security solution end-to-end. So definitely take a look at it if you haven't had a chance to. We've also refactored our role-based access control. So in the whole identity and access management realm, we're really trying to up our game. And a lot of customers are asking for more granular control. So we really refactored, actually re-architected our back to support granular control. And then with our we did that with 8.3. And then our 9.0 release, we've actually now released some role-based templates to make usability easier. And then we're also working on some more improvements in the future there. So a lot of investment going in our back. Also, relative to account takeover, a lot of people are concerned about account takeover with ransomware and supporting 2-factor authentication. So we have introduced SAML, so you can leverage your own authentication provider and implement that behind the scenes, and you can do 2-factor authentication in the web UI. And then in the summer, you'll also see that for the Java UI, and we're also working on getting that support for the CLIs too. So a lot of protect functionality relative to the identity and access management space. Furthermore, encryption at rest. Sometimes ransomware not only encrypts your data so you can't use it, oftentimes they steal it and then threaten to make it public online, for example. So if you haven't taken a look at our encryption at rest technology, we do support that today. And with 8.3, we support it for quite some time actually, but with the 8.3 release, we now support third-party key management systems. So if you want to leverage an in-house KMS, as long as it supports KMIP protocol, there's a really good chance that you'll be able to leverage that with Net Backup. We also have tested quite a few vendors. So that gives you a flavor for a lot of the protect kind of functionality that we've released over the summer, and more to come, like I mentioned earlier.
That's awesome. And I mean, that was a ton of information around protect. I think a lot of what you mentioned is stuff that we've had for a while. And then you mentioned in particular over the last year, a number of improvements. I think the highlight there for me anyway, immutability standing out in terms of native immutability. You mentioned some of the third party as well. From a detect and recover perspective, where are we today with our solution set?
Yeah, absolutely. On the detect front, we kind of have a broader definition than a lot of people. A lot of times people think right around malware detection with ransomware, but we get a lot of phone calls when people go down and maybe were hit by ransomware and need to recover, and then they find out, oops, I wasn't backing up everything I should be. So we think there's a pretty big need to make sure that you're verifying you've got a total protection. And so with our AppTAR solution, we are detecting what's going on with the backup environment, making sure you've got a complete backup environment. Is something look wrong with the backups? We also do some minor anomaly detection in that environment too. So for example, file sizes are changing dramatically. That kind of thing could detect some kind of changes. So AppTAR is a really good solution relative to making sure your environment is safe and sound. We also have an insights product that isn't in the backup environment. It's actually prior to backup in production. That's a great supplement to maybe your existing endpoint detection system. So it can detect account takeover with anomalies from an account level, app level, or a user level, doing things that they're not usually doing, and flag, hey, something's looking wrong with this user, something's going on, could indicate account takeover. It also has some malware screening services using just extensions that are known for malware signatures. So a lot of stuff with our Insights product there. From a futures perspective on detection, customers are asking us to improve our game relative to detection. So you will see improvements relative to anomaly detection by, taking some of the stuff you can get with some of our CLI commands and some logging today, for example, dedupe ratios, and making that more efficient for you from a dashboard perspective. And we're really looking at a lot of ML technologies to supplement our detection capabilities right within the backup ecosystem itself to kind of give you a flavor. On the recover side, you might not be aware, but VRP, stood for Veritas Resiliency Platform, has now migrated into Net Backup. So now it's part of your licensing system. And so it's all about orchestration and automation on recovery, where you can create business services that plan that recovery process for you. So a lot of the manual steps you'd have to do to recover at scale can all be automated. You can also do non-disruptive testing, set up those other environment connectivity components, even do a stop and hook up a script on your own and maybe do a malware screening call, for example. So there's a lot of power in VRP to help you get up and running efficiently and effectively. And now that it's part of Net Backup with the 8.3 launch, definitely take a good look at it. From a futures perspective, we are improving some of our VM recovery capability. Some of our customers have been, wanting faster bulk recovery with VMs, and so we are implementing a new type of recovery with VMs called the technology is called CBT, or change block technology, where we can actually take our MSDP technology on deduplication and recover that data super fast. So if you want to recover 30 VMs from yesterday in a very fast order, you'll see in our summer release the ability to select those 30 VMs, pick a date and time. It'll automatically pick the best recovery snapshot and then recover those very, very fast compared to what we can do today from an expediency standpoint. It really works well when the recovery time is pretty close to current time. The farther and farther you go back, because we are using deduplication technology, the less and less viable the option is. But if it's near term, within a week, it's going to be a very good solution and option for our customers.
Wow, that was a lot of information, and I want to throw it out to the audience here in case they have any questions. If you have any questions about anything that Dan just covered, which was substantial, please let us know either in the chat. You can type it in there, or if you want, raise your hand and we'll go ahead and unmute you if you want to present a question from an audio perspective. Right now, I'm taking a look. I don't see any yet, but if not, I have plenty of questions, so we can keep going. So you mentioned futures on a number of fronts. Is there anything that you wanted to cover, like, or dig down a little deeper on from a protection point of view? I know that's something that's near and dear to your heart that you're working on pretty actively. Is there anything coming in the near future that we should be aware of from that point of view?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to just also say, please ask questions. This is really here for you. So we'd love to verbally hear from you or hear you in chat. So I'll do another request for that. Relative to how we're going to continue to expand protection, immutability expansion's a big one. So as of today, for example, we support our Flex platform, the 5340, the 5150, with a really secure containerized approach for an end-to-end solution. We also just certified EMC data domain using their retention locks, and so we can manage immutable storage into that platform. I mentioned earlier that we support NDC, so that's a theme. We're going to be expanding mutability. AWS S3 is coming, and then there'll also be some other S3 targets that might not follow the standards appropriately that we'll be prioritizing. And Paul Mayer is a colleague of mine.
I think. Just Dan, real quick, it's funny you're mentioning this very specifically because there's a question now in the chat from Matt regarding basically non-standard S3 API stuff.
Yep.
So Backblaze B2 is what he's mentioning. Yeah, I think folks want to hear a little bit more about that cloud integration. I don't know. You mentioned that Paul Mayer covers some of that, but do you have any more information around that?
Yeah, I'll give you the high levels. Some of the deployments that the storage providers have really aren't suitable for driving immutability. So we really need to work with them, making sure they're implementing the spec that we can handle the data at the level we want them to. So for example, we know Microsoft is making some changes to their S3 support, and we're expecting that because we want that change to support that platform. So when they're not, when a platform provider is not supporting the spec specifically, we're going to take a prioritized approach to look at those because there's more validation we need to do, possibly more interaction and possibly code changes we'll need to make with those vendors. If they're following the spec really well, there's going to be more of just a quick testing and get off the ground. I don't have a specific list of the priorities, but don't assume that all S3 players are going to be ready to go in summer. Our laser focus is getting AWS up and running in summer. You will see that happen. I've already seen demos of it. It's well underway. Getting the other ones prioritized, we could follow up with some priorities there, or just give us a call and we'll let you know where it is kind of in the priority.
Awesome. And then there's also an additional question there. It looks like the question is around whether or not there's CBT support for third-party storage via OST, or is it just for MSDP? I don't know if you know the answer to that one.
Yeah, right now it's just MSDP for the summer release.
Awesome, good info. So you've talked a lot about the current state around our protect, detect, and recover offerings, and you've talked some about the futures. Have we had any third parties take a look at the offerings we have and assess their validity and whether or not they can make an impact for the enterprise?
Your third party as in storage providers, or can you give me more context,
like
Alex?
Analysts, anybody certifying or at least assessing whether or not we meet standards like FINRA or any of that kind of stuff.
Got it. So when we started developing the immutability functionality within Net Backup from a management perspective, and then MSDP and Flex from a storage perspective, and then the third parties we referenced earlier, we wanted to make sure we're doing that right. And so some high-level comments, and I'll get to the standards here in a second, is it's very important for us to make sure that storage is immutable, which means you can't change, and indelible, which means you can't delete. And Net Backup Master is actually giving the control of the duration of that image to storage. So with our Flex deployment, for example, it was really important to look at all the attack vectors, and we wanted to prevent as many or lower the attack vectors as much as possible is the best way to say it. So if someone hacks into the OST APIs or as a net backup admin and tries to expire an image early, we want to make sure storage rejects that request, regardless of where that transaction or that request is coming from. A lot of those requirements, we worked collaboratively with a company called Cohasset, and they did an assessment on the overall platform, and that's how we got off the ground with that product. So they went through a full assessment. If you're not familiar with the FINRA regulations, there's also some SEC regulations, primarily around the securities and trade regulations on immutability. We've complied to that, and they've created it's probably about a 10-page document on how we handle immutability according to those regulations. That's the key one that a lot of our customers have been asking for. But I think it's also important from a broader perspective in the financial space. Outside of securities, you just have like GLBA, for example, really trying to protect that data and keep it safe and sound would be another example of a regulation we're trying to keep compliant with. Other ones in the public sector space, we have items like FIPS 140-2, and this kind of ties back to your protect question on improving our protect capabilities. We are improving a lot of our crypto to be a 140-2 compliant. A lot of it is already on the at-rest side, but now we're going through the entire platform, and any crypto that we're using, we're making sure is using ciphers that pass 140-2. So those are some examples of third-party either assessments with Cohasset or just regulations that we're complying with. So I'd really like to hear from the audience on, is there any specific regulations beyond that, or certifications you'd like to see, or government regulations that I didn't bring up that you'd be interested in? If there's any additional that you'd like us to take a look at, we may already have, but feel free to jump in too.
Well, awesome. While the audience mulls over whether or not there's any other certifications they'd like to see us comply with, there are some additional questions in the chat. And it looks like one of them, as an example, is it sounds like the reporting that we have seems to be perhaps lagging behind some of our competitors. Anything you can talk about regarding reporting of ransomware activity in the backup environment going forward? I know that, like, as an example today, you mentioned Aptar being able to see unusual activity. The net backup console can show you unusual activity, but that's a manual process, right? Is there any automation going forward that might help with that?
Yeah, so if it's reporting relative to detect, I kind of referenced a little bit of that earlier doing, we're looking at a malware engine. It's a clustering technology, just so you know, to actually do anomaly detection, looking at some key backup anomaly variables as part of the post-processing, and then sending those alerts and actually giving you the ability to interact with them, dial up sensitivity, and those kinds of things. So I think that'll be a pretty good reporting activity. If it's reporting about user activity and making sure users are doing what they need to be, we have made some enhancements with our 8.3 launch where you can actually, when people are logged in as a net backup user, we can monitor their activities, and all that can go to a syslog, and you can configure what you want to get dumped down to that syslog, and then any of your reporting services like a Splunk or whatever can pick that up. So we have improved some reporting from a user auditing perspective too.
And then there's another question around the net backup catalog. They're really asking about the architecture of the catalog creation as a whole, but I think I would focus that a little bit towards the lens of ransomware resiliency. And are we making any improvements there with regards to the catalog, or have we made any improvements?
Yeah. There has been some review of the catalog to harden it. I've had some people say, hey, I want the catalog to be immutable, but you really don't want that because the catalog needs to change, right? But we do have a desire to harden the catalog, and that's a backlog item in our roadmap. We'll probably refactor some of the architecture first to pull the catalog out of the master and have it as a separate entity. And so the architects have looked at how to do that and improve that over time. And it's also kind of been working in conjunction with some of our FlexScale solutions. So you'll see that. I don't have, that's not going to be out in the summer, but it is a backlog item to harden the catalog better than it is today. What would recommend is, definitely back up the catalog. And you can recover it just by looking at storage, but having a backup the catalog is also a best practice.
Awesome. It looks like there's basically, it looks like and if I apologize if I'm pronouncing it wrong, but Georg asked an additional question around detect. He said, not just detect, but things like blast radius detection. I'm assuming he means like, peripheral impact of the ransomware beyond just the initial image, things like that. I know that we've looked at working with partners that would have better insights into ransomware behavior. We have a lot of data, right, regarding our backups. And we've talked about presenting the data that we have to others to be able to analyze and basically look at behavior of ransomware that they've seen across other, environments. Can you talk a little bit about that and, what we're looking at there?
Yeah, I don't have any near-term blast radius concepts. We have worked with our Aptar team, and I believe they have some of that functionality available today. And I don't know if we have any other backup Aptar folks on the phone that could answer that question. But I personally don't have any near-term stuff, but most of that functionality would be in our Aptar solution. And I'd like to, have one of those experts answer that question.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know that there is a session later today. It's worth noting that Dan is involved in, but Anna Simpson is there from a detect point of view. And so I think it's at 1 o'clock Central, I believe. It might be noon Central. I'm trying to remember. I apologize if I'm getting the timing wrong. But there is another ransomware resiliency session. The session itself is pre-recorded, but the experts, including Dan, will be live to answer questions. And so Anna Simpson will be there from our Aptar team, and she can definitely help with regards to any of those questions. So hopefully that addresses what you're talking about, Georg. And if you can join, I would recommend joining that session later.
Yep, I'll make sure she's ready for it too.
Awesome. Cool. Well, for now, it looks like we've tackled the questions that were out there. One of the things I was curious about, and we kind of already touched on it with the security systems that we've talked about, is what are we looking with regards to partnering, right? So obviously, we're not a SOAR/SIEM platform. That's not really our focus as a company, but there are plenty of SOAR/SIEM providers out there. And in terms of interoperability, in terms of immutability, other storage players, all that kind of stuff. What can you tell us a little about what's going on in the partnering point from the partnering point of view?
Yeah, this is a little bit farther out. So this isn't, summer release kind of information that we're pretty far along with, which is kind of what I was referring to earlier. But we are taking a really close look at actual, what I'd call malware detection and partnering with vendors for malware detection, as well as better interoperability with alert management systems like a SOAR or a SIEM platform. So I'll give you some use cases that we're thinking about, and a call out to anyone who wants to talk to me about this. We are grooming some of these requirements, and I'd love to just have a dialogue of how you'd want to have this work with your environment, but I'll let you know what we're currently thinking. So a couple use cases on the detect front. So one use case is, hey, I want you to be able to do malware detection with my cold storage and have that scheduled, because malware could be sleeping and backups, and you might not have the best screening up front, or might miss some early screening even in the backup environment, and be able to periodically check that. That's one use case. Another use case, which seems to have more interest, is I touched on a little bit with VRPs. So it's being able to do automated detection as part of the recovery process. So think a clean room where you can park the backups in a clean room, do scanning, hook up to a malware vendor. We're not a malware scanning solution, and we don't desire to be. There's a lot of good ones on the marketplace. So we have talked to several vendors about being able to hook up to their solution. We might decide to pre-integrate to one or more of those, as well as just have, like we can do today, allow you to hook up to your own in that environment as part of the screening process. So there's a lot of, how do we make that efficient? How do we tie that to VRP? Do you always want it tied to VRP as part of the recovery process, and then back into production? Relative to interoperability with SOAR/SIEM platforms. So if you're not familiar with those platforms, they're generally in the CISO's department versus a backup department. And, we're having a lot of backup admins say, hey, I really want that anomaly detection, but if it's malware detection, I want to kick it over to our security department. So what can you help me with there? And so having that interoperability to be able to send something to a QRadar or some of the Microsoft platforms that are out there, and others. And some even have playbooks, and you can have full integrations with these detailed playbooks and really elegant integration versus just a file dump, and they pick it up from there. So we're looking at those use cases where we could notify downstream solutions saying, hey, we think we've got malware, and then have those threat hunters in your CISO department be able to take that versus a backup admin or both. So that use case is obviously there too. From a converse perspective, is sometimes a threat hunter might be working on some malware and, hey, they don't have, they're looking at something that they discovered in production, for example, and they want to know how long has this been in the system. And so now they want to interact with the backup platform and ask NetBackup, hey, how long has this been in your backup stores? So nothing that would be triggered off of backup or triggered from scanning that we drive from a backup perspective, but just actually being a response system to a query from a SIM platform directly. And so we've looked at some use cases there, and we're trying to assess market viability and desire to actually have that kind of interoperability as well. So I'll stop there and just once again, if people want to talk to me about that in more detail, it is farther out on the roadmap doing that kind of stuff, but I'm interested in how you'd like that to work and just have those use case discussions with you. So,
and I mean, it's easy to get in contact with you, right, Dan?
Yep.
Yeah, just dan.sanden@veritas.com.
That's right.
I'm a little trickier. My full name is Alejandro, so I trick everybody there. So if you get a bounce back from me, just so you know. But there's another awesome question actually from Doug, and he basically wanted to know if there was a way to have immutability locks be separate from retention of the images. So like, let's say you wanted an image to be immutable for 3 days, but retained for 30 or a year or 7 years or whatever it is. Can those two be decoupled?
Yes, but we don't do that today. That would be my quick reaction, and I'll talk about some use cases there. So inside the architecture, well, the way we've deployed it today with Flex and other solutions, the normal policy retention time is also the retention time of the immutable image. So they're one and the same today. But from a database perspective, we have actually architected them as two different dates. As we build out those use cases when that's wanted, we just haven't exposed it yet. So we have it in a backlog as a concept we might want to deliver. But with that said, I will talk about some approaches that some customers, because there's some confusion sometimes at how we've deployed immutability. So oftentimes, like with a Flex platform, you can have multiple worm storage containers. And if you haven't heard that, what's this worm storage container? It's a MSDP secure container all by itself that's hardened in the Flex platform. And you can have one of those containers have a retention of 1 day to 5 days. And you can have another one have a retention for 5 days to 10 years. And if you're deploying air replication, you can set a different retention on that replication. So there's a ton of flexibility about, do I want that second copy to be immutable or not? You can do that today. We just don't track them as different dates within the NetBackup platform. So there's ways to kind of get at what you're asking for with the architecture today. But from looking in the NetBackup master, do I see an immutable date and a normal retention date as different dates? Not today.
So awesome answer. We have just 2 minutes to go. So kind of wanted to start to wrap up, but it sounds like because it's already baked into the architecture, when and if we do go to deploy this, it'll be a relatively light lift, right?
That's why we architected it that way. We just didn't know if there was enough demand for that, so we haven't pulled the trigger on it. Yep.
It looks like at least 2 people are interested. It looks like Aman also indicated vice versa. Like, is there a way to expire the image but maintain the retention lock for longer to make the data still immutable? That's an interesting use case. I don't know how you'd get that data back. I haven't
heard that one. I'd like to learn more about that one. Yeah.
If it's expired from the NetBackup catalog, I don't see how it would be recoverable, but it's a fair question. 1 minute to go, Dan. Any parting words? Anything you want to wrap up with?
I just want to say thanks for being a customer. Thanks for joining. I love talking to customers, so don't hesitate reaching out. It's my job to make sure our priorities align with you. And we've got a huge lean-in effort on security. We're focused across all those 3 pillars, and I'm so excited to be here. I feel like a newbie, even though it's been already over a year. But thanks for joining.
Yeah, and I want to echo that. I mean, I definitely feel the momentum at the company behind these efforts in terms of ransomware resiliency. And so I think it's great to see, and I certainly look forward to some of the stuff you mentioned in terms of near term. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and enjoy the rest of the day today. Conquer every cloud.
Yep, thanks for the actions. Yep.